You'll be happy to know this homily will be shorter than the usual Holy Day homily. That's because yesterday morning Father Zach fell, and time I set aside for preparing homily was limited. Father Zach is okay. He, in fact, just this morning we had a meeting to have a chairlift put in over there, and it will be called the Zach lift. So the Merrick Fire Department was very solicitous in picking him up and bringing him to Mercy Medical Center yesterday afternoon. You won't be surprised to know that Father Zach asked each of the two young firefighters who came with the stretcher if he knew them or they knew him. "Do I know you?" he said, which is another way of saying, "Do you come to church?" One of them said, "Yes, my grandmother Maureen, she volunteers in the rectory." And Father said, "Oh yes, she's wonderful." And the other guy said, "You haven't seen me here yet. I've been meaning to come for a while." So Father Zach then jokingly said, "Well, it's about time. I'm glad my fall brought you here." So he's always evangelizing. I think the angel Gabriel could have said the same thing to Mary at that moment of the Annunciation, as the fireman said to Father Zach. "You haven't seen me yet, but I've been meaning to come for a while." How long do you think God waited to find the right person to physically carry his son into the world, just as that firefighter physically carried Father Zach to the hospital? How long was God waiting to find the most receptive tabernacle to hold Jesus? And how long has God been waiting for you and me to make a more complete, wholehearted, and enthusiastic embrace of his will for us at this particular moment? However long it was for Mary, she was the best repository of the Father for his Son. And so with the Immaculate Conception, we look back to the moment Mary, not Jesus, was conceived. And we trace back her receptivity, her yes, not just to that momentary question, that momentary meeting with Gabriel, but an entire life of saying yes. And so from a theological and historical perspective, we trace back her continual yes to the moment of her conception, and we label it immaculate, or free from original selfishness, also known as sin, original selfishness from the moment she was conceived in the womb of St. Anne, her mother. That's basically what the Immaculate Conception means. On January 1st of this year, on the feast of Mary, the Mother of God, the homily theme for that day was the concept of 2020 instead of 2020. It was incorporated into the Epiphany prayer that you may have at home. And the idea was to connect to the notion of 2020 vision. The thought was to try to use this year of 2020 to conceive, as it were, God's plan and vision for us in a better, in a clearer, in a more insightful way. Conception is usually defined in one of two ways. I checked it out on Google yesterday. Number one, the action of conceiving a child being conceived. Or number two, the forming or devising of a plan or an idea. Today's feast is obviously associated with the conceiving of Mary in the womb. But the other definition of conception is also at play here. At the beginning of 2020, no one had any conception, any plan, any idea that this year was going to be so tumultuous. Who would have imagined situation after situation, month after month that unfolded, impeachment, COVID-19, the shutdown, no Holy Week gatherings, George Floyd, riots, disrespect for the law, politics galore, the election being questioned, and now the COVID spike. A novel written by some famous author entitled 2020 with all of these variables wouldn't have attracted any publisher. It would be considered inconceivable, not imaginable, implausible, unbelievable. In other words, it could not be what we have experienced conceived. As bad as things have been in 2020, fortunately, we didn't have the whole picture of this year and how life and things would come to birth and maturity on January 1st, 2020, the Feast of Mary, the Mother of God. It was a gradual unfolding of events for us in 2020. And likewise, it was also a gradual unfolding of events for Mary and Joseph and Jesus. Fortunately for Mary, on the day the angel Gabriel appeared to her, she was not given a clear explanation, a 2020 hindsight perspective, a crystal ball, or a video preview of what was going to transpire that year or the years ahead in her life or Joseph's life or Jesus' mission. She was just asked to consent to the moment, to that moment, and the graces would flow from her willingness to commit to God's invitation. The question of Father Zach to that young firefighter is a good one. Do I know you? Have I seen you? For us, the question is, do I recognize God in this 2020 year, in all of these changing and difficult circumstances? God the Father invited Mary to journey with him and their son Jesus. Mary conceived Jesus, but she couldn't conceive the whole plan at that moment. Thank God. Neither can we for our lives or for this year of 2020. Grace is more original than sin. And so, like Mary, we have enough grace, step by step, to get us through the evolving situations of life, just as she did, the spiritually out of wedlock pregnancy, the difficult birth in a cave, the flight to Egypt, the loss in the temple, the rejections, the suffering, the cross. Mary conceived Jesus, but fortunately, she couldn't conceive all of these realities at that moment. Grace is more original than sin. And so this day, December 8th, is a very different day than January 1st. But we're still here, still ready, in spite of everything, to trust that God will get us through as he did for Mary. She didn't have 2020 insight into the future, but she had 2020 clarity for trusting one day at a time. Grace is more original than sin. I am the maidservant of the Lord. And so, as we gather together this morning with Mary, we continue to pray. May it be done to me according to your word.